Welcome to the Tea with Amanda Roley. I am sitting down with Washington Congressman Michael Baumgartner of District 5 for a candid conversation about his first year in Congress, the criticisms he's faced, and what he plans to deliver next for Eastern Washington. I'll be asking him to spill the tea, got to be on brand here, on his priorities for 2026. And we'll talk about accountability and the questions many constituents, supporters, and critics alike want answered. So welcome, Congressman or Representative Baumgartner. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Amanda. Appreciate it. Ready to spill the tea. Love it.
I like it. Well, and Happy New Year. Getting things, fresh
Thank
eyes
you.
on things. Great. Well,
Yeah,
so to
yeah.
start out, I do have to point out you've got some nice swag going on. Tell me a little bit about that. We talked about that getting into this. You have some new gear you're wearing
Well,
today.
these were the Christmas presents that I bought for our team here. So yeah, we have some Team Baumgartner jackets. It's we voted in Congress earlier this morning. This was called a flyout day, so most members have left town for the day. We're back voting again on Monday. I try to get back almost every weekend when I can, but because this is a narrow weekend, it's just Saturday, Sunday off. We're back on Monday. I'm not going to make it back to Spokane this week, so we're just here doing some work in the office and trying to serve the people Eastern Washington from here in DC this weekend.
Yeah, well, and this is a first for the Tea. We're doing a virtual chat with you in your office in DC. So this is really cool. All right, let's talk about let's start things off here. You've now wrapped up your first year in Congress and got to see how things really work, right? So before we dig into policy, what is one thing about being in Congress that surprised you or something you didn't fully expect walking in?
It's a pleasant surprise, but I get way more visitors from Eastern Washington than I would have thought. Almost every week we get multiple constituents and visitors from Eastern Washington. There are a lot of people that come out and visit, which is great. I love taking people around the Capitol, taking them to committee and meeting with constituents because those are people I work for. But I didn't know there'd get as many visitors as we do.
Oh, that's great. So a lot of folks wanting to see what you're up to, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of business groups, trade associations, middle schools, high schools, and that's great. We're very blessed, and we should never forget how privileged we are to live in this republic, live in a representative democracy, and where you get to vote for your elected leaders. And this is the people's capital. I work for the people of the Fifth Congressional District, and it's always nice to have my bosses come out and check in on me. And I really enjoy it.
That's great. All right. So then if you had to describe your first year in one word, what would it be and why?
I'm just blessed. I've really enjoyed it. So it's a lot of hard work to be a member of Congress. That's you got to be good at sleeping on airplanes, given how much travel there is back and forth. And certainly, it's been there's some political polarization in America and even Eastern Washington. But I just feel very lucky and blessed to get to live in this country and to get to do what I do as a member of Congress, try to represent the people. So yeah, very grateful for the opportunity to do it. But it was I think a wonderfully productive year last year. We helped with the largest tax decrease in American history. We set records for the one big beautiful bill in terms of the good policies to help working people in Eastern Washington. I think protected our borders, and so there's just so many successes from the last year. I feel good about, and we're ready for more in 2026.
Yeah. And to kind of key off of that, when you look back at your first year, what do you think you executed well?
I think being a team player that fights for the people of Eastern Washington here in Congress. There are 435 members of the House. 220 Republicans won elections, 215 Democrats. So it's a very narrow majority, and it really is a team sport in politics. When I was in the state Senate for 8 years and was able to do big things like the new WSU Medical School or funding for the North-South Freeway or reducing college tuition or putting in funding at Mount Spokane for ski lodges or in, Eastern Washington University for the science building, there I was one of 49 state senators and I was a committee chairman. So I had relatively more influence starting out. Now I'm a Congress, a freshman member of Congress, and so you got to pick your spots. And like I said, 435 is a big number. Not to mention the 100 senators across the way. So it's difficult. It's by design. It is difficult to get legislation passed in Congress because it's legislation that will impact the entire country. But within that, I think we've done a really good job. I was elected as one of there were 4 freshmen elected positions in my freshman class. I was elected the policy rep. I'm proud of that. I was the first freshman Republican to get a bill off of the House floor. That's now over in the Senate, so we got to go work on that issue. And we just
That's right.
did
We
great
talked about that in your first 100 days.
Yeah.
That was a big pat on the back for
And
you. Yeah.
yeah, and just this week, we did a great job for Eastern Washington in appropriations. So, in the appropriations bill that went off the floor this week, it actually overall spends $2 billion less than the Biden administration budget, which is good for the fiscal issues of the country because we do have a lot of debt. And yet, even though we were doing that, I secured for Eastern Washington, helped secure $1.7 million for a new jail in Ritzville, another $1 million for clean water in Ritzville. Now, what else did we do here? We did $750,000, no, $1 million, excuse me, for the city of Palouse for their wastewater treatment plant. $1 million for the city of College Place down by Walla Walla for water storage down there. About $1 million for the city of Republic for their wastewater issues, and $750,000 to the town of Springdale. This was the water and infrastructure budget we did. So we felt really good about what we did there and still doing it in a more fiscally responsible way. So I think that's winning for Eastern Washington. Feel very proud about that. Certainly in that one big beautiful bill, there was so much important stuff in there, and probably the main reason that the animating factor of the last election really was the unease over our open borders and just the catastrophe that was going on with border security. So in that one big beautiful bill, we provided enough fundings to secure the border wall and hire new law enforcement officers. Obviously, fentanyl is a huge issue for Eastern Washington. All of us know people that have had family members that have died from fentanyl. So really getting that border secure, working with law enforcement to try to crack down on those drug networks. That's been some of the work we've done here. I've been very proud of as well too.
And that's an issue that you campaigned on. And I want to jump ahead to that. I know you talked about border policies when you were looking to get into office, and I wonder, how did that play out for you? I know when we had initially talked on the T, you talked about the border wall, the Remain in Mexico policy, and E-Verify. So I wonder what measurable progress you saw there toward meeting those goals that you set during your campaign.
Yeah, so it's great to be able to campaign on something and actually see it come to fruition and success. Illegal border crossings have gone from 200, 300, 400,000 a month under the Biden administration to now basically zero under the Trump administration. And what we did in Congress is support those policies, and then in the one big beautiful bill, put in the funding to finish that border wall and have enough border enforcement to make that sustainable. So that is something that I'm very proud of that we supported with regard to that policy.
And Congressman, so we talked, you have a long list there of things that went well for you in your first year. What is maybe a couple of things that you fell short on?
Well, it's we're halfway into the first Congress, and like I said, it's kind of by design. One of the things that I'm really intent to try to do is try to improve the situation of college sports for schools like WSU, Eastern Washington, Gonzaga, to make sure that we don't have what's special about college sports, just to go to all the big schools back east or down south. And so, I'm still working on those reforms to try to fix NIL. And again, one of the challenges with that, quite frankly, is the Big Ten as a conference and the SEC as a conference. They have some pretty highly paid lobbyists, and we have some members from those SEC and those Big Ten schools that don't necessarily see things the same way that I do for the little schools. But we're making some progress on that. Actually, it's been kind of unusual, maybe, but it's been a good example of bipartisanship. I've actually been working with Democrat Senator Maria Cantwell on those issues, and happy to do it. Somewhat ironic. In 2012, I was the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate and lost to Maria Cantwell back in 2012. But we neither of us held a grudge, and we're working together on this issue because, again, WSU, Eastern, Gonzaga, we have some different issues than those other schools do. So that's an issue where we're continuing to put some effort in.
Yeah, and I remember that was a topic we talked about in your first year. It's not every day that we hear that. I mean, yes, we love to hear some bipartisan collaboration, but it's not every day that we see across the lines, even within our own state, working together. So it's interesting that you guys do have the same belief in what those standards and what policy should look like going forward for college sports. It almost feels like college sports is just a moving target. Do you get that sense right now as things are kind of developing? It's a new frontier.
I just really want to have policies that increase the amount of opportunities in college sports for America's sons and daughters graduating from high school. I don't want it all to be about money and second NFL and TV contracts. I want it about more opportunities to participate. And as American society has gotten more polarized and more divided, we need things like college and high school sports so that people have something they're not arguing about, not Republican or Democrat. You're just a Coug or an Eag or a Zag or, maybe all three like I am. And just enjoying that. So I do think it's important for the social fabric of the country, and it's good for Congress to have some issues to work on that just aren't the big, fighting against issues like sometimes we engage in a lot up here. So I do think it's good.
And keeping our eyes on D.C. here. So what's one concern that you hear consistently from constituents that you don't think Congress takes seriously enough? What has your experience been like?
Well, I hear a lot of things from constituents that, they're worried about, the cost of living, certainly. They're worried about their economy. They're worried about, like, the future for their country. I think Congress takes those things seriously. But in Washington state right now, there are a lot of challenges. I mean, some of those deal with federal law and federal decisions, but there's also some real things that are challenging coming out of Olympia. We have a state government that has passed ever more regulation in some areas and made life more expensive with making it harder to build a home, increased your tax. At the same time, Republicans in D.C. that I was working with gave the biggest tax decrease in our country's history. The Democrats in Olympia gave the largest tax increase in the state's history. So those are two very different philosophical approaches to what the role of government is and who should pay for it. And I, of course, am somebody that wants to keep more money in your own pocket and look and try to help small business. But there's some legitimate philosophical differences there. So, I think Congress tries to deal with them. But this is in our country's constitution, the way America was designed is, and we're out of balance right now, but the way America is designed is most of the action is supposed to be at the state level. Congress should really be doing big things like national security, big infrastructure, border security, international relations. And then in our republic, you're supposed to have the ability to have differences amongst the states. Washington, D.C., over the course of the 250 years of our wonderful republic has really sucked up more power than it should have. And so sometimes people look to D.C. to, quote unquote, solve problems more than maybe D.C. should be. Whereas if we can push those things back to the state, because we are 350 million people and we're not all the same, and clearly you look at like somebody like Donald Trump, in Eastern Washington, Donald Trump got almost 60% of the vote, like I did. In downtown Seattle, Donald Trump got 11% of the vote. So obviously, the people in downtown Seattle, they have different philosophies and views than I do, and they don't want to be forced to live the same way people in Idaho do, and the people in Idaho don't want to be forced to live the same way in downtown Seattle. And so the way we can stay united is to respect the differences, the diversity we have in thought, and to have more state and local control. So some of the things that we're dealing with here, just shouldn't be federal government issues. They should be issues that should be at the state level. And we're trying to rebalance that as well.
Yeah. And what about the concerns that you hear from constituents who don't necessarily support you? So I wonder, is there any issue that they've raised that you think that you haven't addressed enough yet?
Well, I think we're doing a good job in addressing them, but a lot of concerns that I hear from constituents are, and they're legitimate concerns, but there are a lot of people. Well, Donald Trump got almost 60% of the vote in Eastern Washington. He got 40% of the people that didn't vote for him, and a lot of those folks, anytime Donald Trump does something, we hear about it in my office. So we hear about immigration enforcement. We hear about tariffs. Tariffs is an area where I also have some concerns because we produce a lot of goods for export in Eastern Washington. So we work with the administration. I'm pleased that a lot of the tariffs are being reduced now. That's good. That's good for us. But that would be an area, where people disagree. Certainly, sometimes in foreign policy, there are differences. I think, what we did with Maduro, the Venezuelan dictator, I think that was in America's national security interests. But certainly, we hear from constituents that don't agree with that. And so, I always say, whether you voted for me or not, I work for the people of Eastern Washington, so we want to hear those concerns. Now, we'd like to hear them in a respectful and sincere way. Sometimes we hear in ways that are kind of more political, or people are just frustrated, but that's part of being a member of Congress, and we deal with it as we can. I do like when people treat my staff well and respectfully, and that doesn't. But there's a lot of I think America right now, people that are some people follow politics like I follow the Cougs, where it's almost like you picked a team and you're a fan, and you're going to support thicker skin. And I think on some of the rhetoric and everything, if people could try to turn the temperature down a little bit, because whether it was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, or concern over these recent shootings in Minnesota, we just have to think about our better angels in terms of how you discuss these things and understand these things, and otherwise I do worry about the increasing polarization and what could come next from America out of that.
Sure, sure. And on that note, I guess what evidence would you point to that you are listening to people who fundamentally disagree with you, as well as those who support you?
Yeah, well, we did. I was very proud. We did 11 town halls this year. That was for a while. We were the member of Congress that did the most town halls in the country. I don't think I have that record anymore. I like doing town halls. We had a town hall that was pretty spirited
A little
up at
spicy.
Whitworth.
A little spicy.
Earlier in the
Yeah.
year, and so I was happy to do that. What we found is, so, as a member of Congress, we have to find other people to sponsor the town halls and host the town halls for us. And unfortunately, because of some of the disruptions up at Whitworth, it has been harder to find people who would like to host the town halls, because
Really?
they look at some of the folks that want to be activists, and yeah, I mean, maybe Krem 2 wants to host a town hall sometime, and put it together,
I'll
and
put a
we'll
word
try
in
to
and
make it
see.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
try to
so
make
does
it
that
work.
mean that I know when those kind of after the Whitworth town hall had happened, you mentioned you have 11 that you circled around to. So have you been trying to reach out and host in-person town halls since then? Or
Yeah, we're
okay,
doing. We're gonna do one we got one in Walla Walla
okay,
coming at the end. I know this is gonna be on TV. Don't quote me on this. I think
gotta
it's the
figure
end of
out the year first,
January.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
no, it's the end of January,
okay,
and so we have one in Walla Walla. We'd like to do more in Spokane. I mean, I like doing town halls.
sure.
They've always been something I've enjoyed doing. When I was the treasurer of Spokane County, I did 2 town halls a year, and I always did them as state senator. I enjoy the back and forth and the questions. What's tough right now with the disruptions is that the hosts worry about how are they going to provide security. What if there's going to be, and so it's unfortunate that if people could be more conversational about it, and less sometimes theatric, or trying to do it for political reasons. But again, people have a right. People have a right to be angry. They have a right to be concerned. They have a right to disagree with each other. And with me. I mean, this is a representative democracy. That's what we work in. But I think if sometimes people slow down and listen a little bit, they'll find we do have a lot more to. That there are some things that we agree on that maybe they didn't come in with that. But I do like doing town halls.
So let's see. I did see reports that you thought maybe we won't continue those because of security concerns, that sort of thing. So going into the new year, do you think you plan on doing town halls again in person, or would you stick to over the phone?
No, we'll do them in person, but they got to be safe. Obviously, we have to have hosts that can be safe. And I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, the Charlie Kirk thing, the assassination of Charlie Kirk was really, really unfortunate. And you've seen, some other areas where there's been, challenges of violence and disruption. And we just want everybody to be safe. So if we can have hosts that have confidence whether they can be safe, we're happy to do them.
Sounds good.
And we'll be,
Oh,
the thing is, that we'll be this. The thing about this year as well too is, we are going into an election season this year, and I like doing political debates, and so some of the debates that we will eventually do will be, kind of similar to a town hall as well too. Once we get to that part of the season
great.
on the campaign side.
All right. Well, now, before we move on and dive into your goals and priorities for 2026, I do want to ask you about a few recent national events. I have a couple here that I want to put on your radar. So, first of all, 17 House Republicans joined Democrats to vote to extend the Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies for 3 years, and you voted against that extension. So, can you explain your reasoning and what you see as the next steps for the ACA in Congress?
Yeah, so Obamacare is a really flawed program. It was really designed by as a pretty partisan measure, working with insurance companies that kind of put America on a pathway towards single payer national health care, and it's not a system that's sustainable. These enhanced subsidies were passed during the COVID era, and they were meant to be temporary. They were actually passed by Democrats with no Republican support, and it was Democrats that decided that they should end this year. But we're a country that's almost $39 trillion in debt, and I have zero interest in pumping a bunch of money into a broken Obamacare system that doesn't perform better and have more chance at fiscal sustainability. Because I want to protect this republic for my kids, your kids, our grandkids, grandkids. And right now we're not doing that. And healthcare spending is a huge part of the budget. So I'm open to looking at the subsidies, but there has to be some reform that comes with the program. And this 3-year extension was just saying, hey, everything's fine in healthcare. Just keep kicking the can down the road for another 3 years with a system we can't afford. And I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like those who did vote against it as well, it sounded kind of the same points you're making. It was a COVID era move and wanting to be more fiscally responsible. Did it surprise you that some GOP members joined the Democrats in passing this?
No, and I'm sure you're going to be shocked to hear this, that there's politics breaking out in Washington D.C. But going back to the to the government shutdown of the fall and other things, the Democrats. This is a competitive democracy. The Democrats don't like that Republicans are in control. They would like to get back in control, and so they do a lot of messaging and I would say fear mongering around health care because they think it's something that can help them with the voters. And really, this was a series of political acts. Again, Obamacare was designed by Democrats. These subsidies were enacted by Democrats, and it was Democrats that decided that they should expire. And then the idea that it's supposed to be Republicans that are supposed to somehow be responsible for all this, I think, is a little inaccurate. But we did have members primarily from some of the tougher districts that are being targeted in campaigns that crossed over to take what was basically a political vote. And so the Senate has already voted no on this measure, and so we'll see what happens next. I'm all for healthcare reform, but what we need more price transparency. So when you go in to get a healthcare service, you actually know what you're paying for and can make an educated decision. And we need more healthcare offerings. We need more products out there, a better connection with your doctor. We need a better job of making use of technology to try to bring these costs down, because right now we just have a system that you can't afford. I was very pleased in the One Big Beautiful Bill that we provided a record amount of funding for rural healthcare. Washington State is going to get nearly $200 million for rural health care in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I'm somebody that grew up and was born in Pullman, Washington. My early years were in Colton. I went to high school at Gonzaga Prep in Spokane. And so, my wife and I have had 5 kids at Sacred Heart. I had my appendix removed at Pullman Hospital. I have 2 parents in their 80s that are
Deep medical
frequent
roots
use
here, Congressman.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. Healthcare is so important. Everybody in Eastern Washington has a connection, and we all want care for our kids and our parents and ourselves. But we also have to make sure it's a system that can be supported. One of the reasons that I worked so hard on creating the WSU Medical School when I was in the state Senate is, I didn't want all the doctors being produced just in Seattle. We needed more doctors in our rural areas. And we now have more doctors graduating in Spokane than they do in Seattle, which I think is great. We need to get some of them to stick in our rural areas. And so, it's a real issue. Our population is aging, which means more people are going to be using healthcare services. So we need to continue to do things that provide that care and bring costs down. And that shouldn't be a Republican or Democrat thing, but it is on a trajectory that just can't continue the way it is.
Well, then what do you say to those who believe that, not seeing those subsidies extended, if that's how it turns out, that it removes access to affordable health care for so many who need it?
Well, so the subsidies themselves, just so people understand, they are for people that are fairly well off. They were enhanced subsidies that people that were middle class or above middle class, and essentially the money was just going to insurance companies. If you look at the earnings reports or the stock prices of healthcare insurance companies over the last 3 years, they have skyrocketed because they were getting all this taxpayer funded debt money for their kids and grandkids have to pay back in this form of subsidies. And there were no simple reforms, even like a $5 copay to make sure that did someone really need this. And so it has been a really poorly designed system that has allowed insurance companies just to pocket a lot of the money. And putting in some simple reforms, another big difference with this, that I would disagree with some of our Democrat constituents in the state is I don't think taxpayers should be paying for illegal immigrant health care. In the state of Washington, in the current state of Washington budget, $150 million of our state tax dollars are going for illegal immigrant health care. That's a policy I disagree with. And we need to make sure that when the federal dollars are coming in, they're not going for illegal immigrant health care because that acts as a tractor beam for bringing in illegal immigrants into the country, and it makes us less secure because of they're not brought in a way that's authorized, and but also it takes funding away from American citizens, and so that's another one of the reforms we need to make sure that there are safeguards there, and in one of the things we did in the big beautiful bill is we put common sense reforms in social welfare programs on things like if you're an able-bodied adult, you ought to work to get public benefits. We cannot afford to have able-bodied people sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and playing video games. They got to be out working if we're going to be on the public tax dollars. So that was a big reform of what we did that I'm proud about. And I'm also proud about these constraints that we put on social services for illegal immigrants. And that doesn't mean you think illegal immigrants are bad people or you're trying to be not understand the system and the real impacts on our economy. But we have to start with just the basics of getting America back to its core functions and sincerely dealing with this debt. People kind of, well, $39 trillion in debt, what does that mean? I mean, that is this year, your Congress, like other years, and we're trying to work on it, and we're trying to make it better, but understand, this year, your Congress will spend 20% more money than it brings in. Well,
How
it's
do we
already
know that?
$39 trillion. Yeah, it's the budget numbers. You can look at the budget numbers. I mean, you can look at
Okay.
projected revenue. That's why the budget continues to grow. And so the fact that we are at a 20% deficit, if you in your personal life were deeply in debt and continued every month to spend 20% more money on salary, somebody would say, hey, we got to change some behavior here, for us as a country. And because America is the world's sole superpower and we have the most dynamic economy and we have the biggest military, people will lend us money in the form of buying American bonds in ways that they won't lend to other countries. But at some point, economic math and gravity will impact us as well too. And one of the things that all this debt does is it pushes up interest rates, which makes home ownership, more difficult. So it has a lot of consequences for our economy. And so we just got to try. I mean, the two biggest issues that I will probably deal with as our member of Congress, and I fight every day for Eastern Washington, but the big stuff that I'm going to be dealing with, and who knows how long I'll be here, but something is real right now is how do we deal with the national debt, and how do we deal with our national security at a time when we have a rising and aggressive China, and then you see things like Russia with their invasion of Ukraine and some of the nefarious things they're doing with China around the world, and still continuing threats of Islamic terrorism and other things. So those are the big picture things that Congress has to deal with, is really how much money we spend and how we protect ourselves. And when they're challenging things to solve, it's going to take both Republicans and Democrats working together.
And I do want to move on. I got a couple other questions on
Sure.
recent events
Okay,
here I
yeah.
want to get through with you. So after that fatal shooting involving an ICE agent in Minneapolis, the Trump administration called for stronger federal response. So how do you assess the administration's handling of that incident? And do you support increasing the number of federal immigration officers in Washington state?
So I haven't seen enough of the incident to make an educated, responsible
Okay.
comment on it. I've been, frankly, I get disappointed anytime something like this happens when immediately people that should know better are making very inflammatory and sometimes statements without having all the facts on the ground. Certainly, we don't want to see anybody get killed, but we also want to see people not impeding law enforcement officers. So I just don't know enough to say right now. Washington State, on your other question, Washington State is a sanctuary state because of rules from Olympia, so-called sanctuary state. That is very dangerous for the people of Washington because what it means is the Democrats in Olympia try to pass laws to keep local law enforcement officers from cooperating with federal law enforcement officers. That's dangerous for a number of reasons, but one of them is that if you look at the threat of terrorism, and when we had the attacks of 9/11, the biggest recommendation of the 9/11 Commission was that all levels of law enforcement should work with each other. They need a better job of communicating and work with each other. So when you put barriers between law enforcement, it reduces that communication. It's less safe for all of us. One of the things that I've talked about, this year that there was an illegal immigrant. This is an example. There was an illegal immigrant Honduran gang member in the Spokane County Jail that had a bullet in his calf muscle. And the feds knew he was there and he was in the country illegally. Now, in a non sanctuary state, when he served his time in Spokane, they would call up the feds on the phone and say, hey, we got this fella here, come in and get him. And the reason the feds like going to courthouses is because they're safe and they're behind metal detectors and they can pretty easily facilitate somebody moving from the jail, going to the federal system, getting processed and getting out of the country. But in a state like Washington State, with those sanctuary state laws, they're not allowed to tell the federal immigration enforcement officers. So that means instead of sending two guys to get the gang member, now he's back on the street. They got to take 6 to 8 guys when they find him. It's going to take more time, more of our tax dollars. And when they go to get him, it's going to be much, much more dangerous for the officers, for that individual, and for the community at large. And so immigration enforcement is just much better and safer for everyone if people cooperate and there's not these really absurd and dangerous sanctuary state and sanctuary city laws. And local government needs to take down the temperature in terms of their rhetoric and cooperate. And it'll be better for everybody.
And then I do want to move on to what's being talked about in Congress with the capture of Nicolas Maduro. So following Nicolas Maduro being taken into U.S. custody, what are the discussions that are going on right now in Congress about the next steps for U.S. policy toward Venezuela?
Well, I think a lot of Americans, again, it's divided, but a lot of members of Congress are really impressed with and pleased with what happened. Certainly, Venezuela under Maduro in their regime has become a narco-terrorist state that has hosted bad actors from China and Russia and even Iran. So under Maduro, the Venezuelans were giving blank passports to member of Hezbollah, an Iranian terrorist group, and allowing them to a guy that could put, like, his name was Pepe Sanchez in the, but it's not Pepe Sanchez. It's actually an Iranian Hezbollah agent, and so that's extremely dangerous for a number of reasons. It was the Cubans that were protecting Maduro, which should say something. And so, I was in a classified briefing with Secretary Rubio and Chairman of Joint Chiefs Kane and others this week, and I thought they presented a really brilliant plan, a very brave plan by our special forces to capture Maduro, and I think they have a clear-eyed and realistic strategy for what's next. I can't get into details on what that is, but I would say that I think they have a good plan to avoid some of the mistakes that were made in Iraq. Where things were done to disband the Iraqi army and take the government out and really helped foster that insurgency that a lot of us, that's what I dealt with when I was in Iraq. And so I think they have a better plan here and people can have a lot of confidence moving forward.
So what would you say is the next step that the public could see coming out of this?
Sure, and they've been quite. Secretary Rubio's been public about this. They want to. Well, I thought there was high likelihood we'd be doing something in Venezuela as soon as we parked our biggest aircraft carrier off the coast and started these operations. And so I was not surprised by the activities, but they are going to continue to use embargo of those oil ships that are really the lifeblood and the fiscal. So they have a lot of fiscal leverage, America does, over Venezuela right now. And you saw the release of some political prisoners yesterday. And I think they will look at change in behavior towards American interests. And that starts with sending the Iranians home, getting the Cuban special agents out of there, and not allowing Russia and China to use Venezuela as their playground right in our backyard that really threatens our national security. So we're seeing a series of those things working. But, the point guy on all this, I mean, President Trump, going back to, and I was somebody that was very skeptical of President Trump when he first ran for office, particularly on foreign policy. But if you look at what he did in his first term with taking out Iranian terrorist leader Qasem Soleimani, what he did with the ISIS and Al Qaeda guy Baghdadi, and then how he did the Abraham Accords to increase peace in the Middle East, and most recently in this term, I mean, those strikes on Iranians' nuclear edifice were extremely important for America's national security, and the way that President Trump carried those out with, I think, pretty bold leadership, I think it's been really impressive. But Secretary Rubio, I've also think the American people can have a lot of confidence in. I mean, he's been looking at Latin American and Caribbean issues. He's from Miami. He's the son of Cuban immigrants. And so he understands these issues. He knows all the key players. And it's not to say there's not going to be challenges moving forward, but you have a team, I think, with a demonstrated record of taking some pretty strong measures in America's interest, and in somebody in Rubio that understands the issues. So again, I will continue to provide my oversight role and engage with the administration on these issues, but I feel confident from what I've seen so far.
Right. Coming around the bend here on the present questions that I have for you. On Thursday, you called for a federal review of Washington's benefits, state benefit programs to safeguard taxpayer dollars. So can you talk through what do you hope that review will accomplish, and what do you say to constituents, though, who are concerned about fraud in federal programs?
Well, hopefully what it will find is that there's no fraud. That's what we'd like to find out, But I think given what has been coming out of Minnesota, where there really has been a lot of phoniness and fraud in the use of both federal and state tax dollars, I think, it's right to ask for an investigation. So I have asked two federal government agencies in terms of the Department of Agriculture and Health and Human Services to take a look at how these taxpayer dollars go through. And, if fraud is found, then, the Department of Justice may have to get involved. The Department of Justice may decide to get involved on its own. But we need to look at the fraud. I think it's very notable as well, too, that former Democratic state auditor, it's not there anymore, Brian Sonntag, who used to work for the people of Washington State, is very concerned about the fraud levels as well. So it's not just me. I have been disappointed in Governor Bob Ferguson for not being a little more I guess, upfront and eager to look at the cases of fraud. I mean, these are our tax dollars at work, and they should be investigating this stuff and finding out. And if there's no fraud there, fine. But
So
we need to have that
can you
peace of mind.
boil
'Cause
it
what's come out
down?
of-
What's the main outcome that you're hoping to get through this?
I mean, if fraud is found.
Or I guess
If-
by
if
calling
fraud is
on a review of the budget or the
Well,
state
either
benefits.
one, there's no fraud, and people can say, hey, look, these systems are working as they intended, which taxpayers, you should have confidence. Or two, there is fraud, and we have prosecutions and change how the programs work. But again, we're $39 trillion in debt. There's a ton of money sloshing around, and every time it's theft from not just this generation, but our kids and grandkids. And look, I wake up in the morning to be a member of Congress to try to protect the chance at the American dream for my kids and your kids, the people of Eastern Washington. And we're not going to sit on the sidelines while our money is stolen by crooks and corrupt people that want to defraud the system.
All right, Congressman, we've talked past this past year. We've talked present. Let's look to the future, shall we? So as you're looking toward 2026, what would you say are your top three priorities? Because you first list them for me. What are your top three priorities for Eastern Washington in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I say I wake up every day trying to work to make the people of Eastern Washington safer, wealthier, healthier, and better educated. And so, we're going to continue to work on the safer aspect as border security and making sure in my role on the House Foreign Affairs Committee that America is safer. Part of that is they're increasing our defense appropriations and making sure the good men and women of Fairchild Air Force Base have the support that they need. On the wealthier side, we made a huge a measure there this year with the working families tax cut, the one big beautiful bill. So we're going to continue to work on that. Part of it in Eastern Washington, I'm going to continue to fight every day to make sure our dams don't come out. That's something that continues to have pressure. I would like to kind of a big aspirational project that I have. It's not going to happen this year, but there's the Columbia Basin project where we could bring more water and create more irrigated land in Eastern Washington. You think about some of the productivity around Central Washington that we all have experienced. I think that project was actually only half completed, so there's an extension of that project that happened that we'll be working on that I think would be I like big bold things like the North South Freeway and the medical school to work
Oh
on.
yeah.
So we'll work
We could
on
do a
that too.
whole
And
other
then,
T segment on North South Freeway,
yeah,
Congressman.
one day, right?
Right.
And on the better educated thing, one of the things I'll be working on intently is in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we actually created a $1,700 tax credit that citizens can use, parents can use to go for any school. It's like a school voucher in the form of a tax credit.
Okay.
But to get the ability to use that, the state legislature and the governor have to decide to do it. And right now, there's a lot of pressure. So the Democrat governor of Colorado, to his credit, said this is a no-brainer. Why would I turn down this free $1,700? But there's a lot of pressure
Are there
at the
ties that come with
state
that?
from this. Well, the teachers union doesn't like it because they don't like anything that has to do with school choice or vouchers.
Okay.
And so even though it's a federal program, Governor Ferguson, so we're trying to work to get that implemented. And then, the thing we did on the wealthier standpoint in the One Big Beautiful Bill is, we did no taxes on tips. We did no taxes on overtime. We get increased tax. So people are going to see a lot bigger tax refunds than they've had in the past. But there's another really cool thing in there, which was we created $1,000 investment accounts for new babies born in
Right.
all across America. But so that's going to be great because, if you see there's kind of two Americas, there's an America that invests in long-term savings and can get into a home and afford a home. And then there's Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have a house. They don't have investment. And what these investment accounts that we created will do is help start, long-term investment behavior from newborns. And because Spokane, I'm pretty sure that Eastern Washington qualifies from what Michael Dell from Dell Computers, he and his wife decided to give $6 billion to this program. And I believe that each family in Washington State that has kids at a certain age are going to get $250 for these accounts because our zip codes were poorer zip codes than the national average. And so I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm about 90% sure on that. So that's a really cool thing that we'll be helping to implement as well too.
Of those, what do you think is maybe the most urgent problem that you'd want to address this year?
They all matter, but we got to make sure the dams don't come out. It would be one, and that'd probably 1A would be border security and cracking down on fentanyl, and 1B would make sure the dams stay there because they really are under constant attack from folks that just don't understand our Eastern Washington way of life, and so we'll work on those too. So that'd be two, and then Fairchild. I mentioned that earlier, but
Right.
Fairchild on that refueling mission is so important for our nation's security. We need to make sure those airmen and women are protected. In Spokane, there was when I first got involved in politics, there was a pretty active group called Forward Fairchild that was really galvanized in the community about Fairchild issues and making sure that base closures didn't happen. I think we need to boost that group up a little bit more, get them back being a little more active on things. So we'll be working on that as well.
Great. All right, we're coming around the bend here to wrap up. I do want to ask you some quick rapid fire spill the tea sort of questions. I know you didn't bring any tea with you, Congressman, so I have some. I'm going to ask you to spill it, though.
All right.
All right, so we did talk about town halls, right? So we could maybe see some in-person town halls if we get somebody to host, right? So my question,
we have one going already. Yeah.
Oh, right,
we have one going already.
Right, in January.
So the Walla Walla Union Bulletin is hosting one for us in January. Yeah.
Right, that's right. And we'll keep an eye out. Keep us in the loop on when that's coming up. All right, so my question to you is, which is harder of a room to face, a divided Congress or a packed town hall back here in Eastern Washington?
Oh, probably a divided Congress. I always like meeting with the people back home, even if they
Yeah.
disagree with me. What's weird about Congress, because it is set up on a system of seniority. So in theory, all members of Congress are the same. But this one of the things that was surprising me about Congress is how much control the committee chairs can have over things, and then the
Mm.
staff of the committee chairs. And so that's a little different. And of course, when I was in the state Senate, I was a committee chair, so I had more influence. But here, you're starting out, on the low
It's a
level.
different
So I'm
ball
all the
game
way
on
at
the
the
federal
bottom.
level, right?
Yeah, I'm at the bottom, but I'm humbly speaking, I'm pretty good at this. So we'll get there. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I do recall that you do enjoy like the legislative process of it all, right? The inner
yeah,
workings of
yeah,
it all. So I
yeah,
mean, I think that's a
yeah,
key factor that you need to be on these committees.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next question for you. What problem? Let's see. Moving along here. What is something that you've seen in Washington that would surprise or frustrate your constituents if they knew about it?
Well, a lot of the things that would frustrate them is kind of a reflection of the challenges of partisanship of the American people. I mean, Congress is very representative of the American people at large. So if you think about your group of friends or your family at the Thanksgiving dinner table, there might not be everybody at that table would be somebody that you wanted making big spending decisions or, key decisions. And so there are some
The
different
weird
personalities
uncle
up
or
here. Well, yeah, there are some. Probably one of the differences is that some people that follow politics real intently, if they follow it through social media, there are some members of Congress that just want to do whatever they can to get on TV. And if they're a member of Congress that's trying to get on TV every day, because not everybody is really interesting every day, but if they're trying to kind of get that reaction, then they maybe aren't doing the most of what they can do just to represent their district, represent their state. And so it's actually some of the members of Congress that you hear less often from, the ones you don't know that are actually doing the work up here. There are some that kind of treat it like reality TV, and that can be a little frustrating, and maybe some of the difference of what you actually think about how Congress works and what it actually
where
how it
where do
actually
you
works.
land on that spectrum?
I haven't done. I've purposely not done much national TV this year. We get asked sometimes. It was funny. The one time I did do a national TV was earlier this year. Well, I made two trips with Democrat from Washington State, Adam Smith. One, we went to Iraq. It was my first time back to Iraq since 2008. We have a lot of counterterrorism operations still. A lot of the challenges of Islamic terrorism that we're still dealing with. I think people don't know that as much. But I was out there looking at counterterrorism operations in the spring, and then I was the first House Republican to go to China since 2019, which was a pretty historic
Oh,
trip. I
huh.
went with Adam on that as well too. So that was a pretty big deal when we went to China earlier this year, and very much enjoyed that process. But as we were coming out of that, there's a lot of interest in China because we want to avoid a war with China, and the best way to do that is to prepare for a war with China. So I guess you would ask. I'm sorry, I got filled for. What was the question you asked about that?
I
About
just say
China?
where do you land on that spectrum of on TV
Oh, we're trying to
or
get on
working
TV.
like
Yeah, I was going to tell that story. So ironically, I was doing like a Trump weave here. But the point I was going to tell is
I was like, he'll get there eventually.
Fox. So what's funny is normally, particularly Republican member always want to go on Fox News, but on this case, I didn't want to do it because I was on the West Coast and I had to do it from the East Coast. So I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning to do the shoot,
Ugh, no, thank you.
in my living room on Zoom.
Yeah,
Well, it's funny. I didn't want to do it, but it
yeah.
actually ended up when I went on. Actually, President Trump was watching it, and so he actually tweeted out about what a great job I did. So it was ironic I didn't want. So that was the one time I went on
Yeah,
national TV. So I haven't
that's
been
great.
trying to go on it both. But
Great.
anyway, I'm getting
All
I'm
right,
getting told by my
yeah,
staff
we
I
got
got
to
to
wrap
wrap up
this
pretty
up.
soon
Wrap
here.
this
Yeah.
up. Yeah. Last
Well,
question
hey,
for you.
listen.
What do you think
Yeah.
voters should hold you accountable for over the next year?
Well, I think I mean everything. I'm a member of Congress. When if they should look in terms of how do I do a good job representing them and doing constituent work. One of the things I'm really proud about this year, we did that 11 town halls. I was in every county multiple times. We responded to 170,000 letters in emails. We did something like I don't know how many 900 cases that we received, and we returned over nearly $3.5 million to taxpayers. And so those are all the things that folks should hold me accountable
Great.
for, and and they'll get that opportunity.
Great. All right, Congressman Michael Baumgartner, thank you for your time. That's all for now on the Tea with Amanda Roley, where we focus on accountability,
Amanda.
transparency. Thank you. And we'll keep in touch
Yeah.
with you here as the session goes on. Take care.
All right. Keep the tea hot. See you soon.
Bye.